Alrighty, welcome to this bonus feature, Creative Differences. I'm Jonathan Albin, Game Master J, and today we're going to talk about the elements of play, and in particular everyday role play. Now, for those of you that are here in the tabletop RPG section, you know of which I speak, but this video is being presented also for those that have a background of playing games, but not necessarily role play. And I want to talk a little bit about how role play develops, how many of us are involved with role play, and what ways in which role play can manifest within your regular life and to many ways your extended engagement with other beings of the planet, so to speak. So we're going to start off right from the get-go that role play is something that we as human beings have been involved with for all of our existence. From childhood, we often role play in many ways, trying to understand and comprehend the world around us and the role that other human beings play in existence. We initially start off in child's play by emulating our parents, perhaps, or taking on the persona, if you will, of people we see in their daily lives, whether that be police officers or dramatic actors, or perhaps in the case of acrobats or astronauts, we're looking for things in people's lives that we can practice at to see whether or not they are going to be a good fit for us. And this idea of child's play often doesn't have anything to do with direction or guidance from adults. We simply are emulating what we see in life. Now, certainly when we're youngest, we're emulating exactly what we see from our parents as far as the kind of clothing they wear for their jobs or the kind of roles they play within our culture. But for the most part, we start playing fairly early with imaginative things that go beyond our boundaries, that certainly our parents may not be legal authorities or lawyers or attorneys or peace officers, but we certainly try to emulate them because of what we see in the world around us. And the more expansive our experience level is, the more interesting and alternative are the things that we can become involved with. Pardon me for the freak out of my microphone here. All right. The second is that we become involved with this child's play in a familial way. In other words, our parents see us emulating them, and then they interact with us as far as what they would do in those roles. And if they are playing the children and they are engaging with us, they give us an imaginative framework to work with that is associated with ourselves as far as our brothers and our sisters, others in our extended family, and even those that are in our community. Now, as we start to move from that to a community, we're also dealing with things like our identity. What makes us different from others? What are our roles? How do we fit into the community? And this expands and enhances our role play aspect, but it also tends to undermine or downplay the amount of imagination required. We're moving from a place where it was all wholly in our heads, and now it's into experiential limitations. Schools and such put on performances and plays so that we can experience taking on other roles. There are means where our particular skills get to be tested within the framework of different limitations. Teachers will occasionally use it when we go into that, and we'll go on to that. But when it comes to then the idea of what we're going to do as we grow up, we start to role play different occupations and avocations. Perhaps we think of ourselves as a fisherman, so we role play what it would be like to catch fish. Perhaps we see ourselves as lumberjacks, so we're thinking and acting as if we are in the field chopping down trees. These occupational and avocational role-playing opportunities lead us to engaging our mental abilities with the world around us and seeing how they interact and how they work together. Now, this, of course, is extended even further as we start to develop our relationship with our families, the relationships we will have with those of opposite gender and opposite sex, and whether or not we're going to interact with them and how we're going to do so. And that, of course, then feeds into our tradition and culture. And some cultures utilize role play to a greater extent, and some use a lesser extent. But even those that do so, when we're talking about graduations of extent, it may simply be their choices of which roles and which methods they're going to use. Some of it is flat out practice. You start doing the things that you will do when you're older, and therefore you are working on your imagination by figuring out how to do those things. But in other places and realms, you're thinking completely beyond the sphere, out in the wild and woolly, trying to make your way through the world by engaging your creativity. All of these also lend themselves in later times to dealing with the historical relevance of things. For example, yes, there are horrible things that have happened in every cultural niche, and you can role play and resolve the issues that you might have with them on a psychosocial basis, but they have a historical relevance, and they give you perhaps an understanding on how to engage in these cultural conflicts. And by doing so, you're able to work through them. Now, as we move beyond that, we start to move into the area of esoterics. And this is where we're no longer just playing a role as far as what or who we are, but now we're looking at as far as what or who, what would we do if we were in that position. This starts to develop the concept of philosophy and empathy. We start thinking as others might think. We're thinking about what we would have to be considering if we were in that role. And this lifts the role play aspect to a whole new level, because now we're considering the outcome of our ramifications, not only in a sheerly mechanical way, but in a much more general and broad way. And doing so opens up our mind to greater imagination, more creativity, and a larger amount of conjecture on our part. And this leads inevitably to the idea of classic role play. Yes, you're going to be taking on the role of a specific person doing a specific action at a specific time and place. And by doing that, by building these perspective walls, we're enhancing our creativity, but we're also limiting the scope and the direction so that the role play has a more regimented, more play-like experience. Now, having done this, having moved into the classical role play perspective, some people go even further. They go into live action role play, where you physically do the things as well as emotionally and in a cerebral way, but you're actually starting to do the things. And that's perhaps exploratory exercise as you're looking for what it would be like to actually be in that role. But it's also a matter of deciding that the role playing itself can feel real. And this is where games like NycosRPG is developed, is the idea of making it a game environment that feels as real as possible. And this opens to what I'm marking as adult play. And I know that there are people out there in the world that have already got a check mark and going, yep, he said it, adult play, that's what he's talking about. It's like, no, I'm referring to the idea that we are being adults. We're considering the actions as if we were the beings in a story. We are considering the environment and the conditions that we are in, and playing through that as adult, as being very serious and dedicated and devoted. And all of those things cause a situation of adult play. Now, there are many areas where you could go faster and looser than any of that, but I did want to go through the basic outline of what role play is fundamentally like and how it develops within our culture. We're all role players. We all role play to different levels. The question I would have for you is, of course, which of these levels do you consider yourself to have been playing through in your life? Have you exceeded on achieving the philosophical and empathetic position of role play, or are you still stuck in the mechanical traditions and cultures of role play? Are you looking at it from a classic role play perspective, or have you moved on and become more exploratory in your exercises? It really is up to you, but I would love to hear from you and what you would think. I'm Jonathan Albin, Game Master J. This has been Creative Differences. I hope to see you again in the next episode. Remember, every night at 11 o'clock p.m., we generally are